Now, back to Mike on 690 The Answer.
Okay, it's Minority Monday morning, and we're moving into the final month of the ledge. As I was explaining earlier, Thursday is a pretty important day, and even though most of us, including Beth Fukumoto Chang and many others, didn't really expect to have too many really controversial bills in an election year, but it turns out it's not a matter of controversial, but there's some that are still setting up there that might go away this week, unless you squawk to your representative, let you know what there is. So if you live in Beth's neighborhood, you can squawk right now because she's here. Good morning.
Yep. Good morning.
I was saying earlier that the traffic kerfuffle that I experienced on Saturday, trying to get from Hawaii Kai to Diamond Head, was like what you folks have to suffer every day. So I got a modicum of sympathy.
Yes. Yeah, you have to think through what you bring in the car all that. Yep.
Well, that's what I said. In other words, even if it's somebody's ice cream day in your office, you don't bring ice cream.
Oh, no, you got to buy it once you get to town. Yeah.
Was I right that some of the more bills that may have been considered controversial did kind of make it? That there are some things that are kind of important?
There's nothing that is super controversial. So the one that I was really looking out for, and we've talked a number of times about, was the gas tax increase,
right, the
and
money,
motor vehicle tax increases. For me, those are always the most controversial, and I haven't seen too many of them.
Okay, now that's good news. But then there's some other things that are important. And I do know that one of the things that we need to do, I read an interesting letter from somebody who was very upset at transgender bathrooms on the mainland and not letting people go there anymore, and saying, you mean to say that the whole city and the whole state's fixed up and we don't have to worry about anything else? I think that what we're really looking at, and I'm sure you've sort of seen it or you knew it was coming, the governor's plan to spend nearly $1 million in Kaka'ako looks like being thwarted. I think that you folks in the House and in the Senate don't want people to think that you don't understand how important homelessness is.
Right.
But what's the pushback on this? Do you know?
The biggest thing is the spending. I think the governor, and say what you will about the House and Senate and Democrats running things, but I think at the end of the day, we're trying to make sure that the budget doesn't get too big. And the governor, it's his
really
job.
Big, right?
It's already big. It's the governor's job to ask us to spend money, but it's our job to say no when we think that he's trying to spend a little too much.
What I don't know whether I should say I'm overjoyed about, but usually something that is promoted by or sponsored by or written by a Republican has a tough time.
Yes.
But I also noticed that this time that there is dissension within the Democrats.
Yes.
Because otherwise, some of these things we're talking about would have just flipped right on through, right?
I think so. I think, it signifies that there's, once you have so many of one party, I think they have to fight amongst themselves.
Sure. I think that even Democrats will tell us, and some of you, if you want to, by the way, I'm getting email already, but remember, during these sessions, no email. If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, you can do so by 296-KHNR or 296-5467. I kind of think that it is perceived by most people that I talk to that there is a little bit more dissension in the party, the Democrat Party, than there has been in the past, because even some Democrats understand you can't just keep saying yes to increases.
Right. I think so. And, the dissension goes all the way down. I think the Bernie-Hillary thing is not getting enough attention because of the Republican stuff, but I think it shows some tension.
That being said, new surveys came out on the mainland about the entire country's dissatisfaction with both parties. Yeah. So it looks like it's time for some youth. There's another thing that I wanted to talk about, and that was based on this horrific traffic jam on Saturday morning, and the presence of technology. I do understand that this body camera thing is being looked at by the state, not just by the counties.
Yes.
And so, do you think there is this bill? First of all, maybe you can explain. Whatever bill I'm interested in, you're interested in, anybody's interested in, most of these things have to get out of where they are by Thursday.
Yes. Yeah.
Explain.
So really the majority, so everything right now at this point should be filed with the clerk's office. Okay. So the final versions of every bill should be there for anybody to look online and find. And on today, the caucuses are going to go through. We're going to meet to go through all the bills. So that's in a couple of hours, and then tomorrow we'll be voting on them. So if it doesn't make it out of the House by tomorrow, it's pretty much dead.
Okay. Now we always talk every year, and we talked a few weeks about that. We're going to maybe talk about it this or certainly by next week. That being said, a lot of the flotsam and jetsam is going to be gone on Thursday.
Yeah.
But those bills that go forward, some of them have got to be reread, right? Because there's been little pokes and changes made to some.
There'll be changes, so we'll have to meet the House and the Senate. Will have to decide if they agree with the other chambers' changes or not, and if they don't agree, then we go into conference.
Are those meetings ever mixed use? In other words, House and Senate in the same room?
Officially, yes, it has to be. But we have official meetings that are publicly noticed that the public can sit in on.
Yeah. But you're a veteran now. I mean, in the very beginning, were you kind of interested or say surprised at the way the deal making goes on at that point?
Yes, I when I was a staffer watching it was always very surprising to me. Now, I think since I've been elected compared to when I was a staffer, these days it's a little bit more out in the open. Like I've actually seen conference fights where the House and the Senate are actually fighting, whereas before they would leave the room and fight outside so that nobody sees them.
Well, there are other bodies that get together, and I mean, from what we say, the quote fighting in Hawaii, it's kind of mellow.
True.
Compared to some of the stuff
that's
that's
true.
going on.
That's true.
I play often that soundbite from the guy that threw himself on the floor of the Japanese parliament.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was just like, Harry Carey. He was crying and whining and complaining. Okay, let's go to the telephones. Beth, get you put on a headset. Before we go to the news, let's travel around, by the way. If you've got a bill at this time of the year, this is really the time when you want to let your legislator know what's up. And I'll tell you why it's important. Because even before this Thursday date, if you've got a pet that you've been watching that you're either for or against, this is really clearly the time to say something. Let's go to Rodney, who is in IAEA, wants to talk, I think, about affordable housing. That ought to be fun. Hey, Rodney, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Brother Mike, and good morning, Representative Fujimoto.
Good morning.
I was calling to see what kind of progress you're making on development for new homes, on affordable housing situation with the state. And also, we have a project that we're interested in doing in affordable housing, about 18 acres out in the west side.
Okay. Where on the west side?
Over by Maili.
Okay.
And by the way, let me make this clear, because you know me, I'm in the voice business, right?
Yes.
This is my friend Rodney Kim from Atlas Construction, and we do a show together, and they're all about putting back into this. So this is something that you guys are wanting to do, Rod?
Yeah, that is true, Mike. We've got an opportunity for some land that is zoned residential, unimproved residential, and we're looking to further develop it to create some affordable housing in the area. I know it's on the west side, and I know we were talking about traffic and all that, but hopefully, the rail and all that situation will help out. But just to get some affordable homes on the market, we just came back, a little background here, Representative Fujimoto and Mike, is we just came back from a business conference of 20 builders. We belong to a club of 20 builders. We just came back from New Orleans, and from what I'm hearing, there's some people, and I know the cost is different from the mainland to here, but there's people out there doing affordable housing in Albuquerque, New Mexico, gentleman we met, and he's down to like $79,000 for a starter home, basically.
Holy
a starter home for people.
Okay, how many? Wait, Rod. How many are you thinking about building?
Well, we're not thinking. We're thinking as well. See, that's the thing, right? Is it's going to come down to the zoning restrictions and what the state and the land use commission says we can do. So we're looking for. I'm not seeing any kind of legislation going in this session as far as encouraging affordable housing. So we do want to try and get it a little higher density so we can put more homes into into that area, and also maybe different styles of homes too, like maybe like like a townhouse quads, and then single family detached. I get like a bunch of different entry level products to the market.
Sounds
on that
good
side.
to me, brother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, Rod. Well, listen, let's stay with that. Maybe we'll do a show on that one of these days.
Sounds good.
Okay, brother. Thanks for the call. One more fast one before the news. Let's go from there to Mililani. Talk with Mark, who's got a totally different subject. This is about those noisy little mopeds. Hey, Mark.
A long time no talk to. He said, I was just kind of curious with the mopeds, and as far as the registration and licensing, and then of course the safety check that's going to be involved. Is that? I'm afraid that it might turn into something more, so to speak, a class warfare, to where some folks who choose that mode of transportation because the costs that are associated with it are so low, it helps them to get around, especially with the colleges. And then again, it leads to secondary cause of effect, which would be once you license it and treat it as a motor vehicle, now you're going to have to purchase vehicle insurance to ensure that nobody else is injured. But I'm really just kind of curious to see, is there an alternative that may be in the works to find other ways of curbing the noise pollution by having to go through all the safety checks and registration fees? Yeah,
that's a really good one, and I'm gonna give you the answer off the air with Beth, Mark, because we're up against the news in just a second. And I do know that there's county issues as well there, Beth. But what are you hearing? This is a long time coming. A lot of people are upset about these. It's controversial, these mopeds.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best option that I've heard right now. We've talked about noise meters for the police and all sorts of other things. It just haven't worked. So most of the neighborhood boards, at least I know the ones in Mililani, have said they support doing this because it's just the only way we can figure out the noise. Is this
something that should be looked at as a statewide issue?
Probably, yeah. You don't want it county by county. It's too confusing.
So there you go. Now that being said, one of the dealers was really adamant. He said, you can do whatever you want, and we're going to have lots of more stations to inspect these things. Right. And it's going to cost a lot of money, and then the kid's going to go right home after the safety check and put his old hot rod stuff back on it anyway.
Yeah, which is true. The only thing is then the police can also ticket if they see something or, whereas right now they're not really sure what to do. Yeah.
All the kids think it's a big money grab.
Yes, I know.
Beth Fukumoto Chang and I will be back after a news break with News Director Chaz on Thai with more of Minority Monday coming up. Good morning, Chaz.
Good morning, Mike.
Home of Hawaii's award-winning Mike Buck Show on 690. The Answer.
Okay. So now, just before the break, one of the callers was my friend Rodney Kim from Atlas Construction. And he's talking about affordable housing. I know a lot of builders, them included, are wanting to put back more than enough. And there are still some things that are around about affordable housing. And I know, but that's one of the things that's tough because a lot of people think, if they do that, they're just going to kowtow to the developers. They just want to do this for phony baloney. What is still on the table and what would it affect if it passes?
So I think the biggest thing is the rental housing trust fund bills are still alive, and that would be we talked to a number of developers before we went into the legislative session, and they said that one of the best things we could do is lift the cap on the rental housing trust fund because it's been limiting the number of projects that the state can basically underwrite. So that's one of the things, basically more state funds, because right now what was happening is every year we would have maybe two projects could get approved, but not every project gets off the ground right away because they need more funds elsewhere. So the housing trust fund could only do those projects, but then they got stalled and they'd have to wait for the whole another year to approve any more. So this would allow, as soon as you're able to get off the ground, it would just move things quicker.
Fast tracker.
Yeah.
Well, see, here's the thing that came up. And this even though this is off the air, I reflect, this is my question really, that what Rodney Kim was saying was important because what they're looking for is an increase in density through zoning.
Yes.
Now, what was proposed at the county level, as you know, with these ADUs, just because a lot of people want them doesn't mean they can have them. They got to jump through loops. Right. But that is a permanent decision. In other words, once you built one of those things, it becomes a rental unit for that property forever or whatever. Yes. So doesn't it make sense to take a look at some things and say, well, maybe some of the density and some of the zonings, in order to make things affordable, does have to be looked at?
Yeah, one of the good things when Rodney was talking, because he said that his zoning is not agriculture, right? That's the one word we're looking out for now on the west side,
Watch out for that big ag word, right?
Yeah,
or conservation land,
right?
Same thing, right?
Core Ridge just got approved out by me. That was a really big deal. Ho'opili. So anytime you hear anything about agricultural lands, you have to be concerned. But it sounds like his project is not agricultural land, so it's really about density. And that's going to be something that's decided at a city level.
Okay, what about this? There's always thoughts about this, and I know it's come up, that the state is cash poor and land rich.
Yes.
And so sell land. Isn't it there this huge danger of you create a artificial cash flow and then you run out of land, and now you've got things that you're spending on that you can't cut back. How does that work?
Oh, absolutely. I think the way to go would be to lease state lands. I think selling state land is not a good idea, but leasing is a good idea.
And therefore, going back to ag, if the state could look at some of the lands that may not be suitable for the type of ag that we've been doing so far,
right?
But it might be appealing to say, all right, look, this is fallow land, or it used to be this or it used to be that. Lease it out for bupkis, but get it in production.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot more. We're sitting on a lot of state lands and doing not much with it.
What I'm worried about, and you can reflect this as a rep in your district, that part of the island looks really good because a lot of people living out there. They want more housing out there,
right?
But they're also looking at some of the richest, ag land there is.
Yes.
So it's a hard call, isn't it?
Though, and that's where we're running into problems because it's so much easier to put new infrastructure into an empty spot of land
easy.
Than
drive the lanes over there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Better than trying to fix downtown, but really we should be better developing downtown.
Yeah. Okay, now before we go to our break, last break, let's talk seriously about the ongoing concerns there are at the state and city level about the rail project on Oahu.
Yeah.
Because right now we know that all of a sudden, like for instance, a city council chair decided that he better take a look at maybe asking for the resignation. I mean, there's no question that Ernie Martin may be running for mayor.
Sure.
But that doesn't matter.
No.
Calling for the resignation of Don Horner and Grabowskis is pretty bold.
Yeah.
I mean, is this project in the kind of condition that it needs some oversight, that it needs maybe even the state to come in and say, look, we're the deep pocket here. We got to look at this.
It absolutely needs oversight. I think, my colleagues that voted against the rail tax increase, that was their frustration. And not all of them are anti-rail. They just felt like there wasn't enough oversight. And I'm disappointed in what I've seen since that vote was taken.
What does that mean with respects to the number of people that have either invested in your area or continue to invest in your area, and they were doing that because they were for the rail and thought the rail is going to relieve so much that my investment is a smart one. Now they're saying, wait a minute, if this thing doesn't get built the way they said it was, my investment may not be a good one.
Right. And I think we have a responsibility to build rail. That's why I voted for the rail increase, even though it goes against everything in me to vote for any kind of a tax increase. Yeah. We have a responsibility to build it, but that this city has a responsibility to better manage this project, and they have for a while. So I'm glad Chair Martin's actually looking into it. Yeah,
as a matter of fact, you would think that Chair Martin and the mayor would vehemently disagree on everything, because that's kind of the nature of their relationship.
Right.
But they seem to be parallel on this to the point. Now, there's a lot of people that voice their concern, and you can take this back to the House, and those of you that are out there that want to corroborate what you called me about the other day on this issue, was that there was some relief saying, well, we love these guys, but we need to have a better look because they seem to be at the end of the trail. When somebody says something, it's what they say or nothing.
Right. And my hope is, because we have two people looking at running for mayor, hopefully between Chair Martin and Mayor Caldwell, hopefully one of them solves it. And I'm pretty sure that's the person that we're going to elect mayor.
Yeah. And by the way, that's going to be a very interesting race.
Yeah.
We said before that the ledge was pretty quiet this year because it's an election year and the whole House is turning over.
The whole House is turning over.
Yeah.
Yes.
So have you got your running shoes, new shoes?
Oh, absolutely. I've already started walking. Yeah.
I remember it was Blisters Beth a few years ago. I remember that.
Yeah.
Terrible. But I think that what happens is, and it may be because of the stimulation we seem to have had in the presidential race for both parties here in Hawaii, that there are more people involved. But from what I understand, that's not the case. I mean, from your input to your office, has there been an increase in input to you, or is it a flat year, or what do you think?
In input to me, not really. We're getting good feedback from people that care about sort of everyday stuff, but there's not been a big issue. I think when we talked about same-sex marriage, that was still the number one, issue that I've seen so far.
There seems to be, and this is nationally, there seems to be this great paradigm shift in what is acceptable and what is not. And I do know that there's some people that say, you know what, it's a wave that's coming, and you really can't fight it. But what you have to do is say, okay, well, you can think this way, but here's what we do in my house.
Yeah.
And there are more businesses. Yeah. And I don't know if there's anything to protect or hinder those that want to make a decision based on somebody they're going to accept as a client or not based on their beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, we're seeing that everywhere. And I think, the one thing that I've been really pushing for, and I know my district for the most part agrees with me on this, is just let everybody do what they believe.
Yeah.
We all believe different things. And if you just give them freedom of belief, then.
But, the thing that seems to be happening, and there's a lot of concern about it here locally, because as the nation goes, so go we.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, well, wait a minute. Are there going to have to be restaurants? Are they going to have 3 bathrooms now?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, how far do we carry this stuff? And what about all of the people that say, well, you know what? Somebody that is of a different,
right,
build up than me. I'm not comfortable being in that place with them.
Right. Right.
And I would imagine. I'm really not sure, because I don't know what women think, and you're a woman, but I don't think that there's just as much anxiety on the male side as the women's side on this.
Sure. And I think if it comes to that, there wasn't a push this year for transgender bathrooms.
Yeah.
I don't think it's something that we need to worry about right now. But I think businesses should be able to should have the right for religious protections. But as far as bathrooms go, I think really in practicality what we'd end up seeing is just single stall bathrooms that you lock the door behind you. And I don't
come on
think,
in, whatever.
Yeah.
But where there's a big problem is in schools.
Yes,
with
agreed.
with trans kids that are saying I'm going to be a boy.
Right.
And there's a lot of little kids and their parents that are really uncomfortable.
And I think that's where you start seeing the schools maybe building some single stalls. That's what a lot of schools have done on the main line. I think that's more what we'd see.
Yeah, I was watching the case yesterday where this young girl was going on to college as a swimmer,
right,
and has gone through, a mastectomy and all of this stuff. She wants to be a boy. She is, and she's now on the male team,
right.
And this is okay as long as he's not taking too much, supplements or estrogen or whatever it is.
Right.
Very strange. Isn't it?
Interesting problems.
Beth Fukumoto Chang and I will be right back after this little break. If you'd like to comment or ask a question about what's happening in this week, particularly because Thursday is a big day where bills either die or they go on. 7:46 on The Answer with Malin Moore in traffic. AM 690. Glad you're with us. You want to call 296-KHNR is the number. That's 296-5467. Malin.
That's 296-5467. Here's more Mike Buck on 690. The Answer.
Okay, so it's a legislative voting year. We know that, and we didn't expect there to be a whole bunch, but there is enough stuff to keep it rolling. And I want to tell you, all the times that we ask for you to input and make your point known, it really is important. If you're interested in a particular subject, it is so easy because you can Google bills relating to whatever your keyword is, and you'll find out there'll be a little list of them. And the only question that I get sometimes about that, and I'm sure you do too, is it always lists on the website pros and cons.
Yes.
And yet there's some people who want to say, okay, who controls the pros and the cons? I mean, because sometimes we're victims of what we read. Do you ever hear that?
Not too much, because I think when you see the pros and cons for the bill, so if you read the committee report, then it says what the pros and cons kind of are. But if you actually go into the testimony, it'll say who said what.
Yeah,
right. So that's the key. If you're really interested in a bill, then that's what you should do. Look at the testimony, see who testified.
My issue is, and I get comments to this a lot, and I don't know how to explain this. Maybe you do. That a lot of times you'll say, and I got some right now that I'm looking at, bills related to fishing.
Yes.
There's this big discussion coming up this week about hyena.
Yes.
And I know the entire fishing community's on the edge of their seat listening to see what happens on this. But the problem is, if all you relate to is that what it says there and you don't read into it, you sometimes miss probably the most important points of the bill.
Yeah, I think the best way to go, and I would go back to the testimony, the best way to go is if you see a bill that's kind of interesting to you, see who testified and see if there's any organization that you really trust. So like, say you're a police officer, you're going to trust SHOPO, see what SHOPO wrote.
Exactly.
That's the key.
Okay, now, that being said, how important is staff at this time of the year? How bad are you whipping your folks?
Oh, my goodness. It wasn't too bad this weekend because we actually have less bills than usual. I'm not sure what the count is, but it's clearly lower than it used to be going through the house. So it's not too bad, but it's always a rough time this time of year.
Okay, the most email interest we have, even though we're not taking them, is over this Kakako homeless shelter.
Yes.
And I do know that the governor, everybody is grasping for straws, and some of these ideas are spectacularly good.
Yes.
But this particular one seems that maybe there's a time bomb ticking under its usability.
Yeah.
So in other words, what we're talking about is a massive amount of money for a short term.
Yes. Yes.
Is this thing what's gonna happen to this thing? It doesn't look good. It looks like it's in this week for more hurdles.
Yeah. And I think, that again, the governor's plans, he needs to start defending them maybe a little bit more so that we can see what the long-term value is. I think he has made a few suggestions that are just going to be very costly. And at the end of the day, that's the legislature's job, is to make sure we don't spend too much money.
What about your constituents that work in town?
Yeah.
And they see a little homeless these days in your neighborhood, but not much.
Not too much.
But they get to town and they say, wait a minute, how can these people outsmart the law? And is the state really cracking down? As far as we know, I don't know if you've had to do any bills about this, but there's enough already on the books that maybe the compassionate disruption has been too compassionate. And maybe they've allowed people to just move across the street. Do you hear that?
Well, one of the things that came back in my survey so far, it looks like most people in my community would support a statewide sit-lie ban, which surprised me a little bit, actually. But there was some I think people are just fed up.
Doesn't that paint people into the corner, or paint the legislature into the corner by saying, all right, if the people are saying this, then we must create a place. We have no choice, you know. And so the governor, maybe that was a good idea.
And then that makes more sense, right? Yeah. If you're gonna create a statewide sit-lie ban, then you do absolutely need a place to put people.
Because they have to be somewhere.
Right, but if you don't have to, if you're not going to be willing to force them to go to a shelter, then why build the shelter?
How do you feel about the comments when people say, being homeless is not you're not breaking the law, you're just homeless.
And once, if a sit-lie ban's enacted, it is then breaking the law, right? And so that it's a way to criminalize homelessness, which I don't necessarily know that I completely agree with, but I'm not sure anybody else has better suggestions.
What about this thing going forward about stiffening and this is maybe not a problem in much of the states as it is on Oahu, but really stiffening these penalties to do with feral cats or with furniture that you put on the side of the road. It looks like if you get caught, you're going down.
Yeah. I think when in doubt, we just increase fines and fees. But unfortunately, unless we have enforcement tools, and I'm sure that's what the police have said about most of these bills.
By the way, Beth Chang and I visited a little while ago in the beginning of the program, the moped situation, because that seemed to be coming to a head.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of email. I'm not going to take any specific email, but there was a lot of email reaction to that by saying, is this a state issue? In some respects, I would imagine you could tell me about your counterparts in the neighbor islands. Do they have the same concerns?
I think they have similar concerns in some neighborhoods, not in every rural neighborhoods, no. But some of them, yes. And I think, if we're going to start dictating what people should and shouldn't do, sometimes it's just easier if you do it at a state level.
Yeah. Some people say, Beth, if parents are really minded what their kids were doing, a lot of the problem would go away with that.
Yeah, and I have to say on this bill, I was initially a no vote because my feeling was I just generally don't like extra regulation.
More stuff.
So I'd rather us just not do this. But once my neighborhood boards really got to me and started to say, hey, listen, we have no other solutions. This is all we know what to do. So, all right, that's...
I heard a number that is frightening. I don't even know if it's accurate or not, but they say that the number could be as high as 30,000, and it's probably more than that. I mean, mopeds have been around for a long time, right?
Yeah.
So the kids is just saying it's just another tax, just another money grab.
Right.
I'm gonna have to pay for a safety check. I'm gonna have to pay for registration.
Right. Yeah. And that was my initial feeling about it until I really understood better some of the noise problems.
Okay. You know what? I don't normally do this, but I'm gonna take a call directly because Raphael's down the hall and we only have a couple seconds, and I didn't want this caller to miss. Going in. Good morning. This is KHNR. You're on the air with Mike and Beth Fukumoto. Hello. Who's this?
Oh, hey, this is Matt.
Hey, Matt.
I didn't know if you were actually taking calls this morning. I was just going to try to slide a quick question in.
Let us have it.
I hear about the legislative season coming to an end and so forth. And I'm always kind of curious, some debate about the Jones Act. Is that federal or is that state? Because if it's state, why hasn't people tried to throw it out? And if it's federal, why hasn't there been some unanimous decree presented to Washington, then introduced by our state senators and representatives, signed by the governor, calling to repeal this, so that way maybe people can get a little relief here in Hawaii about shipping stuff here?
How often? This is a great question. How often does it come up?
It comes up almost every single year. And it's a federal issue. The federal government would have to act, and it came up actually during Hurricane Sandy on a federal level. But from the state, we have done resolutions and we've proposed resolutions. They just haven't been heard by some of our colleagues. So not everybody completely agrees. And unfortunately, we have not been able to get a majority of the House or the Senate to even think that we should take it up as an issue. But it has been recommended by Republicans primarily.
Yeah, I just can't figure it out. I mean, it's like nobody ships stuff out here. Nobody wants to ship to store. Right. And when you can send a Connex down to Chile for less than what it would cost to send it to Hawaii, the same distance, same weight, that's a little ridiculous.
Yes. No. Agreed. Yep.
Hey, Matt, thanks for bringing it up.
Right.
I'd love to spend more time on that in the time that we have spent. I do know that there are pros and cons, and a lot of us, it's above our pay grade.
Right.
But by and large, I would have thought that this had to come to a head, because if indeed we are serious about making the mandatory date where we're off fossil fuels, something, including the Jones Act's got to make room for us to be able to do that.
Right. And since I've been elected, I've heard different arguments for and against the Jones Act. I think because it's a federal issue, I have not spent as much time, just because I kind of know it's not going to move in the House.
I'll tell you one thing that was really interesting. In the very beginning, this thing is very old.
Yes.
Okay, in the very beginning, it had a great point. We couldn't compete building ships.
Yeah.
Well, we can't compete building ships, so we don't.
Right.
I mean, it's not as though there's a big shipbuilding industry in Hawaii, in America anymore, is there?
Right, right. And the inception of the Jones Act was a good one. Yeah. And people make good arguments to keep it and to get rid of it. But I think we need to get our federal congressional delegation involved.
Yeah, and by the way, we have never sent a clear message to Congress.
No.
That even though there are many people here that are saying financially it's very important to our state to get to either adapt this or change this or get rid of it.
Right, right.
And Alaska feels the same way in many respects.
And I think getting rid of it is probably very unlikely. I think adapting maybe is a little bit more of an option.
Okay, if this week people want to get in touch with you about something, the best way to do that is
repbeth.com.
Repbeth.com. That's easy.
Yeah.
And that'll get right to you. You know what? There's only one Rep Beth. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.